and ABC iView.
Recriminations fly over the Liberal Party's campaign failings and independents on the edge as counting continues 2 days after the election. I'm Tom Lowrey, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in Canberra. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. The Prime Minister has returned to Canberra to begin the process of locking in a new front bench, with some reshuffling required to allocate new portfolios and juggle factional requirements. In his first parliamentary press conference since the election, he confirmed he'd spoken to US President Donald Trump in a warm conversation. What's the government's first priority in a second term? We'll speak to Employment Minister Murray Watt live in just a moment. Coalition MPs have lined up to criticise the party's strategy after their election wipeout. Liberal Senator Holly Hughes says her policy submissions were ignored, while Dave Sharma says the party didn't act on recommendations from a review of its loss in 2022. The coalition was relying on winning seats in Victoria, so what went wrong? We'll ask Liberal MP Aaron Violi later this hour. And two Teal independents, Zoe Daniel and Monique Ryan in Victoria, are in for a nervous wait, with pre-poll votes showing a late swing to their Liberal opponents. An update from the Australian Electoral Commission is expected later this afternoon. What will that mean for the crossbenchers' presence in the new parliament? We'll speak to newly re-elected independent MP for Curtin, Kate Chaney, later this hour. But let's begin with the Prime Minister. Anthony Albanese spent much of yesterday and today fielding calls from various world leaders, including Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. Indonesia will be the PM's first overseas destination. But it is his latest conversation with Donald Trump that's drawing attention. The US President was asked by reporters in Washington about our election result and described Mr Albanese as a friend and claimed not to know who Peter Dutton was.
Well, I don't know. Albanese I'm very friendly with. I don't know anything about the election other than... He just won again. He was re-elected. The man that won he's very good. He's a friend of mine. I can only say that he's been very, very nice to me, very respectful to me. I have no idea who the other person is that ran against him. And, we've had a very good relationship.
The PM spoke to the US President from the Lodge right before he walked over to Parliament to speak to the press gallery. He wouldn't be drawn on specifics of tariff negotiations or when he would speak face-to-face with Donald Trump, but said it was a positive conversation.
I had a very warm and positive conversation with President Trump just a short while ago when I was at the Lodge. And I thank him for his very warm message of congratulations. We talked about how AUKUS and tariffs will continue to engage. We will engage with each other on a face-to-face basis at some time in the future. But it was a very warm, and I thank him for reaching out in such a positive way as well.
The Prime Minister was also asked about the size of Labor's mandate, considering it won far more seats than pollsters expected, and whether he would be more ambitious on tax policy. He rejected the idea that Labor wasn't already ambitious.
We're not getting ahead of ourselves. I didn't get ahead of myself. In the last 3 years, we had a clear mandate to govern. We had a lot to turn around. We had a positive agenda we've been re-elected on. A forward offer, and I made that very clear. This election was about three things. The opposition leader a few days ago continued to say it was about the past. Elections are never about the past. That's an element, but what people want to know is what you're going to do for the future. That is one of the lessons that I learnt in about 1983.
Well, let's bring in Murray Watt. He's currently the Employment Minister, at least for now, and a senior Labor Senator from Queensland. Murray Watt, thanks for joining me.
G'day, Tom. It's the Labor Day public holiday here in Queensland, and it's been a very happy Labor Day indeed this year.
Oh, happy Queensland Labor Day to you as well. You've been around politics for a long time. Where does Saturday night's election win rank for you in terms of Labor victories?
It's certainly the best federal election result that I've been as involved in. Of course, when we won the 2007 federal election under Kevin Rudd, that was pretty special as well. But at a federal level, I do think that this is the best federal campaign that Labor has run since 2007, and it looks like the result might be even stronger still than back then. Of course, there's been a terrific result here in Queensland, as there was in 2007, but we've got some fantastic new talent arriving in our caucus room, both from Queensland and other parts of the country. So it's a terrific result. Full credit to the Prime Minister for his leadership, and full credit to Paul Erickson and his team for running a great campaign.
Is there a pressure that comes with a comprehensive win like this, though? You've now got opportunity, you've got numbers in the parliament, you've got political capital as well. What are you going to do with it?
A couple of things, I guess, Tom. I mean, first of all, you will have heard every member of the government say that we remain very much with our feet on the ground. We remain very humble about the size of this victory, and we understand that Australians have really given us their trust, and we're not about to betray that trust by, as the Prime Minister says, getting ahead of ourselves. So we do intend to deliver our agenda, but also I think, you know, we have been an ambitious government already in our first term. The steps that we've taken, whether it be on healthcare, taxation, lifting wages, climate change, our international agenda, on a range of fronts, we've taken serious action already. And now, of course, we have the opportunity to build on that and continue to build Australia's future.
How do you tell the difference, though, between a mandate from the voters to do the things you said you do in your campaign, or a mandate to do perhaps something more, to take on the bigger challenges in tax policy, in housing, in IR, in your portfolio as well?
Yeah, look, I know that there's a bit of commentary around that we can now be ambitious and that we haven't been ambitious before, and I just think that's completely wrong. The changes that we've made to Australia over the last 3 years have been significant, and they've made Australia a better place, a fundamentally different place to what it was under 10 years of coalition government. You know, in my space of workplace relations, we literally flipped the wages story from being consistent real wage decreases under the coalition to consistent real wage increases under Labor. And you could say the same for almost every portfolio across government. So I do think that our government to date has been much more ambitious than it's given credit for. But equally, we do know that it's important to remain humble in this term. And, you know, as a Queenslander, I remember what happened to Campbell Newman when he got a big election win. It all went to his head. He did all sorts of stuff that was way beyond the mandate that he had, and he got voted out at the next election. Having been through that experience, I don't intend to see us repeat that, and I don't think that anyone in our team wants to do that either. So we'll be very grounded. We'll deliver our election agenda. Of course, we'll respond to international and domestic events as they happen, but I think that it is a good endorsement of the government to date, and I think it's a real credit, as I say, to the steady leadership that we've seen from the Prime Minister and the rest of the team.
Labor has made changes in office before, though. The stage 3 tax cuts are a perfect example where the Prime Minister says he made the case to the public, he outlined the case for change and then went ahead and made those changes, and he feels he was rewarded for it. Does that perhaps provide a model if Labor does want to make additional moves over the next 3 years?
I don't think so, Tom. I mean, we intend to live up to our promises. The Australian people have voted for our promises in large numbers. We're very grateful for that opportunity to govern for a second term, and what we want to do now is deliver on those promises. As I say, I think that the agenda that we took to the election was much more ambitious than it's given credit for. I mean, the idea that we can get back to a situation in Australia where 90% of Australians can get a bulk bill GP appointment, that's huge for people and their cost of living pressures. Anywhere I travelled over the election campaign, particularly in Queensland, there are still issues with people being able to find bulk bill GP appointments. So it may not be, you know, the most exciting thing out there in terms of headlines, but it makes a huge difference to people's lives. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to be focusing on going forward.
It was only 6 months ago that Queensland Labor was turfed out of office. How did you turn things around in Queensland in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, Queenslanders, as you know, have got a long history of voting one way at the state level and a different way at the federal level. We like to mix it up a bit here in Queensland. We're interesting characters. But also, I think that people did really focus on the federal issues and the federal leaders and what was at stake federally. The other thing I think, though, that maybe hasn't been recognised is the length of time and effort that our candidates, what was our previously small Queensland caucus, and the Prime Minister himself put into winning seats in Queensland. If you go back to the 2019 election federally, we got absolutely thumped in Queensland, lost a lot of seats, very low primary vote, lost a second Senate spot for the first time in decades. We went backwards further at the last election in 2022, and we recognised that we needed to make a bigger contribution to the federal caucus, and frankly, to retain government federally, we needed to win seats in Queensland. So we've been applying ourselves here for some time now. I actually had a look back at my Facebook posts yesterday, and it was 2 years ago, almost to the day, that we began campaigning in some of the Greens held seats here in Queensland over the fact that they were blocking housing and blocking other progress. And I think that long effort from our Queensland caucus, as it was before, and the candidates, the Queensland branch and our supporters, has really paid off. So it's taken a lot of hard work. It hasn't been an overnight success. And I think, as I say, people are able to differentiate between state and federal issues.
I just want to briefly touch on your portfolio area. What are the priorities in IR this term? And what do you make of commentary coming out of Western Australia that there's a fear that the Pilbara could go back, back to the bad old days, they say, in terms of unionisation in that area?
Yeah, well, in terms of priorities to begin with, we made some specific commitments through the campaign. First of all, that we would advocate as a government for a real wage increase, so an increase above inflation for the lowest paid in our community. Peter Dutton did not match that commitment. He was not prepared to take a stand in favour of wage increases for the lowest paid in our community. So we will now, of course, do that. We also made a commitment to legislate to protect penalty rates from being stripped out of awards. Right now, there are a couple of cases before the Fair Work Commission where we see representatives of big business in the retail sector, banking, administrative sector, trying to take penalty rates out of awards. So we've said we'll legislate to stop that from occurring. But more generally, I mean, what we said in the run-up to the election and through the campaign was that just as we had spent the first 3 years working hard and changing the law to get wages moving again, we do want to see wages continue to grow in this country. I think that was a really defining difference between the parties in this election, because I think Australians recognised that having higher wages was a really important part of being able to deal with their cost of living pressures. And they could see a government that had made big changes to help wages grow again versus an opposition who had a record of cutting wages, promised to change many of our laws if they were to win the election, and they voted accordingly. They voted for higher wages rather than lower wages. In terms of Western Australia, yeah, I mean, there has been a campaign run by mining interests in Western Australia in particular over the last few months and last couple of years. They always opposed the changes that we made to workplace laws, in particular the same job, same pay laws, which were about trying to remove the labour hire loophole that mining companies in particular were using to underpay workers. We're very proud of the fact that we've made changes that ensure that labour hire workers don't get underpaid compared to direct employees of those companies. And I'd have to say, given the results in Western Australia, it would appear that Western Australians supported the notion that a government should help deliver wage rises for mining workers rather than wage cuts. We always said that the mining industry is critical to Western Australia, just as it is to my state here in Queensland. But when mining workers do well and are well paid, that's good for the state economies as well, because they can put more money through their local businesses, create jobs in local communities. And as I say, Western Australians spoke very loudly on the weekend and supported the changes that we've made.
Murray Watt, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Tom.
As the coalition sifts through the ashes of their campaign, there are many questions, but most pressing is who will replace Peter Dutton. Angus Taylor is widely regarded as having his hat in the ring, but there are some concerns within his party, Liberal Senator Holly Hughes labelling him an incompetent shadow treasurer. She says she never heard back from party leaders on proposed mental health policies, despite submitting them late last year, and accused Taylor of failing to sell an economic narrative.
I've been out publicly on what I think about our shadow treasurer. I think the fact that the economic narrative was just completely non-existent. I'm not quite sure what he's been doing for 3 years. There was no tax plan. I think the economic team has significantly let down the parliamentary team, it's let down our membership, it's let down our supporters, and it's let down people in Australia more broadly. The fact that they had nothing to sell, nothing to say, and clearly had not done the work that was required.
The Liberal Party's strategy to capture seats in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, their great hope for a goat track path to victory, failed at this election, with key seats like Menzies and Deakin going to Labor amid significant swings. Aaron Violi was one of the few Liberal MPs to hold on to his seat, the peri-urban electorate of Casey. He joins us now from his electorate office. Aaron Violi, thanks for making the time this afternoon.
Tom, good to be with you at this, what is a tough time for the Liberal Party.
Yeah, some of your Liberal Party colleagues on that are talking about an existential crisis. Is that a fair assessment of where the party's at?
Well, there's no doubt that this is a challenging time for the party, and the results on the weekend speak for themselves, and there's still a lot of seats in doubt and a lot of movement with postal votes. We need to look at where we sit holistically after this, and, but it is a challenging time for us. We can't deny that. We need to learn the lessons. We need to, I think, honestly slow down, take a deep breath and listen to the feedback that we've got from the Australian people, primarily at the ballot box on the weekend, but understand why they're not connecting with us as a party, particularly in some of those urban regions, and see where it hasn't worked for us. And that's going to take time, and we need to do that with clear eyes and a clear head. But we have an important responsibility, Tom, to make sure we do that, that we listen and we learn, and we are an effective opposition moving forward, because the reality for the Australian people, we'll talk a lot, and obviously we're talking about the politics of the election, but the cost of living crisis that the Australian people were feeling on Friday, it exists today. The economic challenges in Australia and across the globe exist still today. And the geopolitical challenges we have in our region and across the globe are still here today. And there's a lot of work, a lot of promises made by the Prime Minister and his government. The people have put their trust in them, but we need to hold them to account. We need to play a positive role in driving the narrative forward, because there's big questions the country needs to answer, and we need to be an effective opposition and rebuild to make sure we're in a place to form government again in the future.
Yeah, I want to come back to some of your comments there on connecting with urban voters, but just quickly, what did you make of Holly Hughes' criticism there of Angus Taylor? Is she right?
Look, Holly's entitled to her views. I'm not going to engage in public commentary on what happened in the campaign. I don't think that is a positive way to move forward in the short term. As I said, we need to slow down, listen and learn the lessons and make some decisions. And I'm going to respectfully keep all my conversations and commentary about what we need to do, what went wrong, what we can do differently to my colleagues internally and quietly, because that's the best way, I believe, moving forward, while acknowledging that obviously when you have a result like that, there's a lot that we need to improve on and do differently moving forward.
On that issue you mentioned before around urban seats and the party's disconnect, have you got any ideas on changes that might help the party recover?
Yeah, you hear obviously cost of living was the big issue, but housing was an issue that consistently came up. And ultimately, we need to show the Australian people that we have solutions to the challenges that they face. And we need to accept that at this election, the Australian people made the decision that they didn't believe we as a Liberal Party and the policies we put forward would help address the challenges that they faced. And that is a tough and bitter pill for us to accept, but that's what we need to do. So we need to move forward, holding the government to account, but also most importantly, offering those positive policies that will solve the tangible challenges that the Australian people face. And clearly, the electorate broadly didn't feel that we had the solutions to the challenges they face.
Your electorate is a bit of an interesting one, though. You're one of only a handful of MPs that saw a swing in your direction, including a lift in your primary vote. How are you interpreting that result compared to the results others are experiencing?
Yeah, well, I firstly want to say, when it comes to that, I want to thank the community of Casey for their support and their re-endorsement, and to be able to improve the margin and has been something that I'm proud of. It's an honour and a privilege as a third-generation local to represent this community. But I also want to quickly, pay tribute to many of my colleagues that are no longer with us, great people, but also many candidates that ran great local campaigns here in Victoria and across the country that didn't get the opportunity to be MPs. A lot of people are hurting at a personal level and have put a lot of effort in, so I want to acknowledge that. as I said, being a lifetime local, really focusing on engaging, understanding the needs of the community, and then we were able to put forward some really local positive plans around sealing roads, telecommunications, health issues, and an urgent care clinic into Hillsville, a community of need. So, I believe that the positive plan that I put forward at a local level really resonated, along with the work I've done as a local MP. Sometimes in a peri-urban community, and you have footy clubs and RSLs where you can really dig deep into those communities. So there's still more work we need to do. I'm a big one on looking at understanding where my margin increased. I'm a unique seat, as you said, suburban areas, some regional rural areas. I've got the Dandenongs, which is a beautiful area with national parks, some new areas that I picked up in a redistribution. So I'll go a bit more granular on where, but overall being engaged with the community and putting forward that positive local plan, I believe made a big difference on the day.
There are going to be very few women in Liberal ranks, particularly in the House after this election. By one count, I think it's only perhaps 4 or 5. Do you think the party needs to revisit a conversation about quotas? And do you think the party has a problem connecting with professional women that perhaps quotas might help fix?
Well, again, these are big questions that we need to work through. I mean, the challenge we have in the Liberal Party with people say quotas, the Labor Party direct from the top down, they've got the union officials deciding who gets what, and we are a democratic party and our local membership gets to vote on who the candidates are, and so that's what is the process that has served us well. But we need to look at all options and understand how we can represent modern Australia, and that's something we need to continue to do. But let's wait and see where the results, obviously, there we look at Amelia Hamer in Kooyong, that's still in play. Zoe McKenzie, obviously my colleague and friend in Flinders, we're going to see where she lands. We've got Mary Aldred down in Monash in Victoria, looking like she will hopefully become a Member of Parliament. So there's always more we need to do to make sure, not just gender, but obviously gender and women, but also diversity and representing modern Australia within the party system. But, at a time like this and with the challenges we face, we should be looking at everything, our organisational structure, our campaigning, our policies. We need to understand across the board holistically what went wrong and what we need to change and how we can improve to make sure that we're a strong opposition and we have a sustainable path to government and make sure we have, again, solutions to the challenges the Australian people face. That's what they're looking for, solutions. But this government, like the last election, I said they've had a nice political win and they should enjoy that. But there's significant challenges that they've got to address. They've talked about Medicare and we've all seen the Prime Minister's card, but bulk billing rates dropped significantly under this government. So the pressure's on him now and his government with the mandate they've got to actually deliver, because after the previous election, they made a lot of promises like that $275 power reduction that they didn't deliver. So we're going to hold them to account for the promises they've made to the Australian people at this election.
Just on that policy question, particularly around energy, should the Liberal Party take nuclear power to the next election?
Tom, every policy has to be reviewed. Everything has to be on the table. I've got too much respect for my colleagues, for the processes we undertake, that I'm not going to start freelancing on policy. I think as part of setting our new leadership team, we need to go through systematically and discuss all policies and understand what will work, how we stick to those 3 core principles of the energy system, getting to net zero or making sure we have cheap and reliable power. And, obviously, when you have a loss like this, you need to start again and look at all policies. But I'm not going to start, and I don't think it's helpful for us as a party or anyone to start making policy decisions 48 hours after a loss like that.
Aaron Violi, one last quick question. Your Victorian colleague Dan Teal held off a big challenge from Alex Dyson. Does that put him in good stead to perhaps take on the party leadership?
Good try at trying to sneak in a leadership question there, Tom. Kudos. I'm not, again, out of complete respect to my colleagues. The leadership decision is an internal decision that we will make and we have to make, and I'm not going to make any public commentary on the leadership. But it was obviously, as a Victorian, really heartening to see Dan Teal be able to hold on to his seat against that high level of money that was spent in Wannon. So it's good to have Dan in the team. We need everyone working together, but I'm not going to provide any commentary on who the leader is, because that's an internal discussion that we need to have, and we need to keep that as an internal discussion, in my opinion.
Well, if you change your mind on public commentary on leadership, feel free to come back to afternoon briefing to make it. Aaron Violi, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
The scale of Labor's victory and the depths of the Coalition's loss are historic on a number of counts. Anthony Albanese is the first Australian Prime Minister to win consecutive elections since John Howard, while Peter Dutton was the first federal opposition leader to ever lose his seat. And the Coalition is on track for its worst ever primary vote. To get some historical perspective on the significance of this election, we spoke to political historian and biographer Judith Brett a short time ago. Judith Brett, thanks for joining Afternoon Briefing.
Thank you for having me.
Can you place this result we've seen on the weekend in some historical context for us? Where does this rank among Labor wins and Liberal defeats as well?
Well, I think as a Liberal defeat, it's pretty disastrous, and it ranks alongside the defeat of the United Australia Party, which was a precursor of the Liberal Party in 1943, which was the defeat which convinced Robert Menzies that something had to be done to reform and rebuild a viable non-Labor party.
So in that sense then, how great is the rebuilding task facing the Liberals? Is it a Menzies-esque task ahead?
Yes, well, the task that Menzies faced then was an organisational task and a philosophical task. Now, the organisational task is not as great as it was then, but I think there is one organisational flaw in the structure of the Liberal Party that helps us understand what went wrong with the campaign. The Liberal Party is a leadership party. It doesn't have the sort of policy-making forums that the Labor Party has, where policy gets debated and where the rank and file and the membership have a say. The policy is up to the leader, and the leader can consult, and good leaders would, but it's up to them how much they consult and how much they take on board what they're hearing. And what we've been hearing really in the wash-up from Saturday night is that Dutton didn't do very much consulting. And we've heard, and the Liberal Party's been down that road before. When John Hewson lost the election in 1993 to Paul Keating, and that was a supposedly unlosable election, Keating was pretty unpopular, he had introduced this package Fight Back without much consultation with the party. So the members are out there selling something that they haven't had a say in. And I think that's one of the things that needs to be looked at. The other thing, though, is that in saying that, the policy cupboard was pretty bare. You know, Dutton was responsible for the policy, but the work hadn't been done to develop policies to put to the people.
I want to take you to the philosophy of the Liberal Party and the coalition that it sort of holds with the Nationals. Can the coalition, do you think, simultaneously represent outback Queensland, inner regional areas that it wants to, the outer suburban areas it keeps talking about, and the wealthy inner urban seats that it's lost to Teal MPs? Do you think it can juggle that task, and has it managed that before?
Well, it hasn't managed it, certainly this time. It's a good question. I think it could if it hadn't lost all of its moderates. I think the loss of moderates, and we need to realise that the Liberal Party has been losing moderates since the 1980s when John Howard was leader. People like Ian McPhee, who I'm sure a lot of some of your older viewers will remember, was a moderate who crossed the floor over issues around immigration and multiculturalism. He was lost. So Fred Chaney, who is now a quite vocal critic of the current Liberal Party, was a moderate in that period. So the party has been losing these sorts of representatives for the last 3 to 4 decades. And so I think they need to become more representative. If they want to be able to represent the quite wide range of interests and values and experiences that makes up modern Australia, they need to have a wider range of representatives and be open to that.
Yeah, Liberal leaders like to sort of compare themselves, or model themselves at least, on John Howard. Well, what's the difference between the offering that Peter Dutton made and the Coalition made in 2025 to what, say, John Howard made in 1996? Are they comparable?
Well, John Howard, we know, was always very committed to tax reform. John Howard, I think, had more policy experience and policy substance. I mean, I do think that the lack of policy was a huge problem for Dutton, because what you're voting not just for policies, but you're voting for people who you hope will be competent in government, because nobody knows exactly what will be thrown, what problems will be thrown at the government. So you're making a judgment not just about what they're offering, but how they're likely to act, whether they've got the experience, the competence, the level-headedness to do that. And I think the lack of policy, but also the flip-flopping over policy, did not inspire confidence that this would be a competent government. Whereas I think Howard did inspire more confidence.
Just very briefly, I want to quickly ask you, do you see the Teals, those independent MPs, becoming a permanent presence in Australian politics?
Well, certainly so far, I do, yes. Because I think people we've got preferential voting, and that's allowing the more complex society that Australia's become to be visible politically. And I think that's what the Teals have done. I don't know whether they'll be permanent, but I think they'll be there for a few elections yet.
Judith Brett, really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
As we mentioned in our headlines, a number of Teal independents are set to hold their seats this election, but Kooyong and Goldstein in Victoria remain too close to call, despite Zoe Daniel and Monique Ryan initially claiming victory on election night. To discuss the performance of community independents at this election, let's bring in the newly elected Kate Chaney, independent for Curtin and WA. Kate Chaney, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Tom. Good to be here.
Kate, it's looking like you'll hold your seat with a swing towards you. Is that the result you're expecting?
Look, we knew that it was going to be really close, but there were so many attack ads in the electorate, and we just weren't sure what the impact of those would be. I'm happy with the result, and I think it does reflect it. There are a lot of people who feel pretty disillusioned by the two parties.
What do you think about those fellow independents in Kooyong and Goldstein, Monique Ryan and Zoe Daniel, that now have a pretty tight fight on their hands, really, as counting continues?
Well, I really feel for them. I was in that situation at this stage of the last election and didn't find out that I'd won the seat until the Thursday after the Saturday election. So I know it's a very tense time waiting for that. And I really hope that all the work that they've done and the positive campaigns that they've run will pay off in the end.
Yeah, depending on the results in those seats and in seats like Bradfield as well, we could wind up with more community independents in Parliament, or we could wind up with less. How are you interpreting the result at this point for that movement?
Well, I think whether it's 49 or 51, there's no doubt that this is a movement that's not going away. We've seen the Liberal Party vacate that centre or centre-right position and move to becoming a Conservative party. And I think there are a lot of communities across Australia that are seeing that being represented by someone who's accountable to them rather than a party structure can actually align more closely with their values. So I don't think it's going away.
What do you see as the role of the crossbench in a parliament with a significant majority government like Labor looks set to take up? And do you think there might need to be a more concrete agreement made as a voting bloc between you and some other like-minded independents, perhaps?
I don't think there's any need at this point to become a more formalised voting bloc. I think the role that I can play now is much the same as the role in the last parliament, and that is to look at everything on the merits and represent the values of my electorate and keep some issues on the agenda that the major parties would rather sweep under the carpet. I see my role as looking at anything that's actually going to take more than 3 years to resolve that the major parties would rather not talk about. And I think having those voices in Parliament, having more voices in Parliament that can speak up without being constrained by a party structure means that we have richer discussion about the really big challenges that we're facing as a country.
Where do you think this result leaves the Liberal Party? What message should they be taking from Saturday night? And do you think they perhaps had what would things have been different perhaps had Julie Bishop been made leader so many years ago?
I definitely think that was a turning point in Australia when Julie Bishop was knocked back. There's a lot of love in my electorate for Julie Bishop. And I think that the Liberal Party really is struggling to retain its historical role as being a broad church. And given how rarely people in the Liberal Party actually cross the floor, what we're seeing is policy is dictated by Peter Dutton and David Littleproud, and electorates like mine that are socially progressive, moderate electorates, are just not seeing themselves being represented in the current coalition.
In that sense, if the Liberal Party wants to take back, your seat, which was once a jewel in the Liberal crown, who do you think the next leader of the Liberal Party should be?
Well, that's really for them to decide. I'm glad it's not my question to answer, but I do think that there needs, if they want to retain a role as being a potential party of government, they are going to need to represent more of the people who are in that moderate centre and resist this pull towards the conservative end, this pull of populist Trumpian politics. There are so many people that I speak to in Curtin, door knocking, who sit in the centre and see some good policies from each of the major parties and don't think that the coalition represents them in a way that it did 20, 30 years ago.
I appreciate we're sort of, revising history a little bit here, but if Julie Bishop was the leader of the modern Liberal Party, do you think you'd be a member of it?
Oh, look, I wasn't looking to get into politics. I never would have imagined doing it if I hadn't been asked to do it. So, but certainly I would say my values are more closely aligned with Julie Bishop's than Peter Dutton's. It's hard to know how Australia would have developed differently if we'd had Julie Bishop as a leader rather than Scott Morrison and subsequently Peter Dutton. But I certainly think that there'd be a lot of people in my electorate who would have seen that as being a more accurate reflection of their values in our national political system.
I just want to go back to how the new parliament is shaping up. Will the crossbench have less influence in a parliament with a large majority government?
Well, I think in the last parliament, we've shown that we can influence the conversation and have a positive influence on legislation just by being there and by being willing to work constructively. I have more potential to influence legislation by having a constructive working relationship with the government than my electorate would if it was represented by a coalition backbencher at this point. And I think that's based on building good relationships, showing that you are there with goodwill, wanting to solve problems together, also holding government to account when it's doing silly things, but wanting better outcomes rather than sitting back and throwing rocks for 3 years, hoping that it fails so that it might be your turn next time. Being in the parliament to improve the legislation means you can approach that with a very different perspective.
And just on policy priorities, what do you want to see Labor act on quickly in the new term? And also, just on the campaign as well, it was noted that climate played a bit less of a role in this campaign and campaigns of many community independents around the country. Is that still a priority for you and for your voters as well?
It is still a priority, and it's still, I think, the issue that we get more contact from the electorate on than any other, climate and environment. It is important to people. I think there are great opportunities to be framing that climate issue as part of the long-term planning challenge that we have. We need a prosperous economy that will be delivering things that the world wants in 20, 30, 40 years. And it's that long-term thinking that I want to see on climate, but also on issues like housing. It's taken us 25 years to get into the mess we're in. And we need to start thinking longer term on housing and addressing the supply issue rather than throwing more fuel on the fire. Productivity is a fundamental one as well, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. And tax reform, we've got a tax system that's not fit for purpose for the next couple of decades with the demographic changes that we're seeing. And we need to be having these brave conversations and listening to a broad range of voices to build an appetite for some of that bolder reform that we've really missed in the last 15 years.
Kate Chaney, thanks so much for making the time this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Greens leader Adam Bandt has blamed preference flows for some of his lower house MPs losing seats in Queensland, but says good results in the Senate are a truer reflect of Greens support. His own seat of Melbourne is still on a knife edge. The ABC has Labor ahead as counting continues. Adam Bandt says the party must stand on its own 2 feet going forward.
We're offering something, I guess, a genuine alternative, and we offered a genuine alternative this election. And I guess one of our lessons from Melbourne over the years has been that we know we've got to be able to win seats in our own rights. That we will have Liberal and Labor working together on preferences together with others to try and oust us, because we are actually offering a genuine alternative. And so our goal, I think, has to be able to win these seats in our own rights. I guess just expecting that there's going to be a variety of people who are going to work together against us on preferences.
One of the Greens' most prominent losses this election so far was their housing spokesperson Max Chandler-Mather in the Brisbane seat of Griffith. There was almost a 17 percentage point two-party preferred swing to Labor rival Renee Coffey, a first-time candidate who's boosted the party's primary vote by 6 points. We spoke to the new MP a short time ago. Renee Coffey, thanks for joining Afternoon Briefing and congratulations on the win.
Hi Tom, thanks so much. It's great to be here having a chat.
How confident were you going into Saturday night?
Look, we had put in so much work, the team and I, over so many months. We really kicked off after the state election in earnest, putting the door knocks in and commuter terminals, speaking with voters, and you know, worn out several pairs of shoes. I personally knocked on over almost 15,000 doors, and the team knocked on over 40,000 doors. So we'd absolutely put the work in, but you just never know with an election until the big day, or even until pre-poll opens. But yep, certainly the work had been done.
As you were knocking on those doors or talking to voters at polling booths, what was changing the minds of people that supported Max Chandler-Mather and the Greens last time?
The big issues in Griffith are pretty much the issues nationally. So cost of living, absolutely number one issue that people were speaking about. Housing, incredibly important to people in Griffith, whether they are wanting to buy their first home, whether they're renters, or even retirees or people wanting to retire who've got young people still living at home and wanting the best for them. So housing, absolutely. And also climate change and the environment were really important issues. And Griffith fundamentally is a progressive electorate, and people were wanting to see real change and real progress. So I think there was some disappointment with some of the blocking that went on and this idea of kind of protest. And, you know, I think the results on the weekend show that people very much want to see progress, they want to see action, and they want to see the needle moving and continue to move on the issues that they really care about.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to the Greens, they spent a lot of time talking about housing and about climate change as well. Was it that issue that people felt they didn't have a voice in government? Do you think that was the sort of, you know, deciding factor?
Yeah, I think part of it is that, like, Griffith has previously had its seat at the government's table, and, you know, we've had a Prime Minister here, so we're used to having really good representation centrally in the government. I think people also, they very much wanted to have things being achieved. So there's so much talk that people can cope with, and they're happy to hear people talking about issues that are close to their hearts. But what they really want to see is action, and they want to see things moving. And that's what they were seeing with the Albanese Labor government. And they weren't wanting to see people standing in the way of that progress.
Does that set a high bar for you as you recontest this seat in 3 years' time? The Greens will, of course, run again very hard at Griffith. They're going to want this seat back. How will you hang on to it?
I think it's the same in countries around and seats around the country. It's all about, you know, being connected with the community and doing the hard yards. You know, yesterday I was out at the Stones Corner Festival, shaking a tin for MND and me for that foundation, raising important funds for them, hitting the ground running. And I think that's what the people of Griffith expect for their member. And I know it's going to be a lot of hard slog and a lot of hard work, but that's what I put my hand up for, and it's what I've been doing in the community now for decades. Griffith is my community. I grew up there. I've been a PNC president there. I've sat on school boards, volunteered with local community organisations and sporting clubs. I've been doing that work for many years now in our community, and now I get to do it as our federal MP, which is just so exciting.
Yeah, your predecessor, Max Chandler-Mather, was quite well known for door knocking in particular. He was also known for things like funding school breakfast in his electorate out of his salary. Is that something you continue? Are there similar sort of things you want to take up as the local member?
Look, I'm looking forward to getting my feet under the desk. It's been a bit of a whirlwind now. I absolutely am a community-driven person, and I have had a long history of involvement with our PNCs across the electorate. So I'm looking forward to working with them, working out where the real needs are in the community, how I can assist best and my office can assist best. It's something that I'm really looking forward to. I'm so excited to be able to do that, and I'm looking forward to having those chats, working out where I can add the most value here locally, but also in Canberra when it comes to representation for this community.
The final numbers haven't been sorted just yet, but Labor might have picked up 5, 6, 7 seats in Brisbane. Has that result taken you by surprise? Is that what you were expecting?
I saw a lot of hardworking people, and in particular hardworking women across Queensland. And I won't forget Matt Smith up north, but a lot of really hardworking women. We have internal tallies of door knocking numbers, and people were knocking phenomenal amounts of doors this campaign and really putting the hard yards in. So when you've got really strong women working really hard, I don't think you can ever be too surprised about what they're able to achieve.
Brisbane and Queensland really was seen as a bit of an LNP stronghold. There was no expectation that Labor would make the gains that it did. What do you think's changed for Labor as a brand at this election?
People really want to see action, and I think, you know, when we look at the Albanese Labor government taking action on the issues that matter to people, it is cost of living. You know, every Australian taxpayer got a tax cut, wages are on the rise. We've actually closed the gender pay gap. It's the lowest that it's ever been. Inflation is under control, and there's been a huge investment in things like Medicare, in early education and care. These are the things that people care about, especially when cost of living is so important. People were seeing that action. They're also seeing a leader that really is leading with empathy, with kindness, with generosity. And I think that was in stark contrast to what the coalition were offering. And the people of Queensland have given a resounding endorsement for this government.
You've been working in mental health before moving into politics. What are you going to be lobbying for now that you've got the Prime Minister's ear, now that you are going to be in Canberra?
I've been most recently a youth mental health CEO for a national charity, and I was really thrilled to see a huge investment in our Headspace centres across Australia, and one in Griffith. We will be getting a Headspace Plus centre. I was able to tour that with the Treasurer a couple of weeks ago and speak to the staff here about the remarkable work that they're doing with young people in particular. It really is that missing middle part of the mental health sector. There's a lot of work for us to do in terms of early prevention and early intervention, and making sure that people have got enough services. It's something that I am incredibly passionate about, and I'm really pleased that the government's taken action already, and I know there's more to come, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, just on that, the coalition took a policy to this election to redouble the number of bulk billed mental health sessions available to people from 10 to 20. What do you make of that idea? Is that something Labor should be considering now it's back in office?
I think, you know, I'm unclear on what the plans are going forward in regards to that. I think, you know, we are absolutely about strengthening Medicare. That is at the beating heart of the Labor Party. And, you know, we've got these fantastic Headspace centres across Australia. And at the moment, our focus is investing in those, which is incredibly exciting. You know, mental health, we know that there is absolutely a real issue for young people and others in our community. It is something that we are very passionate about addressing, and I'm very excited to be part of a government that has mental health in front and centre in what they're doing this next term.
Renee Coffey, congratulations again, and thanks again for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Lovely speaking with you.
There are still votes being counted across the country, with the ABC seeing 16 seats still in doubt. But the trend and the message of this election has been clear. So what are both parties to make of it? Let's bring in experts from both sides of the ledger. Georgina Downer is the director of the Robert Menzies Institute and a former Liberal candidate. And Nick Dyrenforth is the executive director of the John Curtin Research Centre and a Labor Party historian. Good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Good to be here.
Georgina, just first to you. Carnage across the country, really, for the Liberal Party, reduced to just 2 seats in your home state of South Australia. Where did the party go wrong?
Well, it is a historic election, and the history book has been overturned. So many records have been broken. And I must say, I never thought that this was going to be much of a challenge for the Albanese government. History was absolutely on his side. It was 1931 when a first-term government lost government, and that was in the middle of the Great Depression, and James Scullin, the Prime Minister at the time, was facing a rabble of a Labor Party, some of his colleagues arguing for the repudiation of state debt. So Albanese didn't face this set of circumstances. There was certainly a sense that people were disappointed, but I didn't get a sense that there was a baseball bat out to get him, and no one in the community was really arguing that he had to be turfed out. They couldn't bear him. I don't think the community necessarily blamed the Albanese government for the cost of living crisis as much as the critics were suggesting. And I think there were some global circumstances, of course, the Trump factor, Liberation Day in early April really shook people's confidence, and when your confidence is shaken, you tend to want to stay with the incumbent. The other problem, of course, was I don't think that Peter Dutton and the opposition offered a really credible, clear path out of the cost of living crisis through their economic policies. They didn't articulate the why for them being elected and defeating a first-term government. And finally, I think the case wasn't made for nuclear. And a lot of people in inner city electorates who, we're feeling the cost of living in these areas, but they were pretty hesitant about the introduction of nuclear without a really, really sustained campaign making the argument for it. So I think with a range of factors, you end up with this incredible result for the Albanese government. Although I should just say what we have ended up with is a government that has been overwhelmingly re-elected with just a third of the primary votes. The opposition winning just under a third of the primary votes. But it's those minor parties, independents, that have won about a third of the primary votes, and the Albanese government has hugely benefited from the preference flows and has seen this result.
I just want to pick up on the nuclear power issue there. Do you think that a sustained campaign for that policy could have been successful, or do you think it's time for the coalition to dump it?
Look, I'm a fan of nuclear. I'm not going to hide that. I think it is a pathway forward to cheap, reliable, carbon neutral energy for this country when we have really high energy prices. We have, the situation in Portugal and Spain last week where when renewables are under stress, we actually end up with massive blackouts and the country's being brought to a standstill. That's unacceptable. We need really reliable baseload power that's carbon neutral, and nuclear offers that solution. I also think a really sustained, articulate campaign that addresses people's concerns around safety but also cost could be made. It can be made in the future. It wasn't made on this occasion, but it actually requires a lot of policy and political bravery, and we just didn't see this on display.
Nick, I just want to come to you. Did you expect this result? Was anybody in sort of the Labor universe talking about a result like this?
Not quite. I was pleasantly surprised, Tom. It's a rarity in my adult voting life. This is the first time in nearly 30 years since of me placing a ballot on election day that Labor has won two majorities in a row. And I should just pick up Georgina on a historical point. This is actually, it is history making, and it's actually quite a rare thing what we've seen. This is Labor's greatest victory since 1943, when the great John Curtin won Labor's greatest ever federal election victory. Labor's only governed federally about 25% of the time, and Albo set a number of records on the weekend. First Prime Minister to be re-elected since John Howard, first Labor Prime Minister to be re-elected since Bob Hawke, and he also joins the pantheon along with Hawke and Gough Whitlam as only one of three Labor Prime Ministers to take the Labor Party out of opposition into government and be re-elected. It's a very rare thing to do, so I don't think we should underestimate the scale of this achievement. So I wasn't that surprised about some aspects of the campaign. I was surprised about how poorly the Liberal Party did campaign during this campaign. I wasn't surprised by the performance of the Greens party. I wrote a piece for The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald back in January, and I made the bold prediction that the Greens would go backwards at this election, and a lot of people thought that I was badly mistaken in that prediction, but it turned out to be prophetic. They've gone backwards in the House of Representatives. Their total national vote has gone backwards, and it's a big wake-up call for the Greens. And if Adam Bant, their leader, survives the huge scare in the seat of Melbourne, it's time for him. Max Chandler-Mather, we saw both Bant and Max Chandler-Mather out there on election night, basically saying that they're on the right side of history. There was nothing to see here. It was extraordinary hubris, and speaks to the Greens as not being able to move out of not being able to move out on the progressive left, move into the progressive mainstream left, and do constructive things in Parliament. Don't fulfil a blocking role, because most progressive Australians want to see a Labor government get things done. And the Greens also spent an inordinate amount of time talking about the Middle East, talking about Israel, Palestine, and that backfired. They didn't win the inner North Melbourne seat of Wills, and Peter Cleall, a very good Labor MP, will survive that challenge. They also didn't pick up the seat of Macnamara in South Melbourne. This was a clear and brutal repudiation of the Greens cozying up to extremist elements on the far left in Australia, campus radicals, and also fringe elements of the Muslim community in this country. A clear repudiation, and it also if there is a lesson for Labor in this, this is a rare thing, but I'm going to quote the former coach of the Brisbane Lions AFL team, Lee Matthews, probably the greatest player in the 20th century in AFL terms. He once said of Essendon, who were the Goliath of the AFL in the early 2000s, he said about them in a crunch match, he said, if it bleed, he was channeling Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. He said, if it bleeds, you can kill it. And the Greens bled on Saturday, the 3rd of May. So if Labor's can take lessons positives out of this, that the Greens can bleed when not seen to be speaking to and for the bulk of mainstream progressive Australians, but are speaking to the activist base. That's the big mistake they made in this campaign. They mistook their activist membership for progressive mainstream Australians.
Nick, I'm just going to come back to Georgina quickly. Just back to the Liberal Party. How significant is the scale of the task ahead, I suppose, for the Liberal Party, the scale of change required to sort of get the party back to an election-winning position? Where would you start?
Well, I think it needs to start with their values, a reflection on who they profess to represent, which used to be the forgotten people, the middle class of Australia, everyday Australians who aren't represented by organised labour, the union movement, or the top end of town, big business. So it's getting back to those roots. It's getting back to things like smaller government, that it is private enterprise, individual businesses that drive the economy, that people want their freedoms protected. They want their freedom to speak freely, to worship freely, to live in a socially cohesive society, and to be proud of their country and the liberal democracy we have. So getting back to those values, supporting people to do their very best through economic policies that reduce the burden on individuals and allow them to thrive. And I think, for me, one of the most sort of stark examples of where this campaign for the Liberals went wrong was when the opposition opposed an income tax cut. I mean, this is a party that has been fundamentally for reducing the taxation burden on individuals, and they didn't support that. And I just thought, well, that type of policy instinct was counter the Liberal Party value system that has been in place since the creation of the Liberal Party 81 years ago in 1944. So, getting back to basics, I think a huge amount of policy discussion needs to take place once the leadership is settled. That work absolutely has to be done. And finally, I would say, candidate selection is crucial. You've seen, the previous interviewee. You had the new member for Griffith. Obviously a community-connected candidate. It's having candidates who are really connected in communities, who are able to bleed for their community and represent the full diversity of Australia, more women, more diverse candidates. I think, women felt left out of the Liberal Party's policies, multicultural communities felt left out. These are people who in the past have been strong supporters of the Liberal Party. Women used to flock to the Liberal Party through the Howard era, through the Menzies era, and you see time and time again over the last few elections that women are saying no to the Liberal Party. And I think, starting off with values, with what you believe in, is fundamental to the policy work that must be done.
All right, just very briefly, Georgina Downer, it looks like Zoe Daniel might lose her seat of Goldstein. Is that perhaps one positive, one little green shoot for the Liberal Party? We are running out of time, but just briefly.
Oh, Tim Wilson will be an excellent next member for Goldstein. He was an excellent member for Goldstein beforehand. He's got a brilliant policy brain. He's a great advocate for his community, and I've got my fingers crossed for him. All
right, Georgina, Nick, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
And that's afternoon briefing for today. Stay with us here on ABC News. Joe O'Brien's up next with today's top stories. See you soon.